Hi everyone, I'm here the Bard. My pronouns are they, them, and welcome to my video. So at the beginning of the year, I set a goal to do at least 2 videos every month. I was going to do one at the beginning and one at the end of the month, and it was going to be what books I had read that month. I did this for January. I did a mid-month February. I never did March. So I'm just gonna read out what books that I read in February and March. So far this year, I have read 34 books, which puts me, I think, like 10 books ahead of what my goal is or something like that. So in January, I read 14 books. In February, I read 10 books. And then in March, I read 10 books. I only need to get about 9 books a month in order, like 8 or 9 books a month, in order to get my reading goal of 100 books. I obviously have surpassed that. So let's get into what books that I read. So in February, I read Moth Pit by Amara Lynn. I read Heartstoppers, volumes 1 through 4 by Alice Osman. I read books 7 and 8 of the Wayward Children series by Shannon McGuire. These books are Where the Drowned Girls Go and Lost in the Moment and Found. I read Spoiler Alert, The Hero Dies by Michael Ozziello. I read Harold and the Purple Crayon by Crockett Johnson. And I read The Haunting of Hill House by Shirley Jackson. Then, if we go into March, this month I have read Much Ado About Nothing by William Shakespeare, Masks, Book 1, 2, and 3. So, the Masks, Book 1, 2, and 3 by Amara Lynn, which are Masks, Raven, and Falcon. Those are the 3 books. I then read the London Calling series, so book 1 and 2, which is Boyfriend Material and Husband Material by Alexis Hall. I liked the first book. The second book I kept getting very angry at, and I hated the ending. Like, it was a fine book reading it, but then I got to the ending and I felt like the promise that had been made by the title was broken. This is mostly because when I was reading it, it kept talking about queer marriage and LGBT marriages, and it made me really upset because the 2 men didn't get married at the end. And like, if this had happened in real life, then I wouldn't have a problem with it, because people make their own decisions, and like, we as people don't have like any obligations to other people or whatever. But I felt like what the book was saying, or what it was trying to say, was like, you don't need to get married just because people fought for your right to get married, which is true, and I don't have a problem with that. But the fact is that the message I kept getting, and they kept like reinforcing this by the language that the characters used, was queer people don't need to get married because straight marriage is the proper way to get married. And there were several times in the book where they were like, marriage is for straight people. Literally, what the characters were saying was marriage is for straight people. And it blew my mind, and it made me really upset, and I didn't read for like 2 weeks after that. And then Kate Kavanagh did a video about Legends and Lattes and how much she loved that book, and me and her had a discussion in the comments below that video about what a good book it was. And the only thing I can say about this, because I downloaded the audiobook version of it to reread it, because I have the physical book version and I wanted the audiobook. The only thing I can say is that I think my dyslexia got in the way of me liking it that much, because when I very first read it back in December in the physical format, there was a monster in it that there wasn't like a really good description of it, and it was just kind of like the Scholomance, and I was like, I don't know what that is. And I tried to look it up, and there wasn't anything there to look up because it's a made up monster. And I was very upset by this because I was like, I don't understand what this word is. And it put me off the book a little bit, but I did finish reading it, and like the characters are great. The voices of the characters are great. There's great witty banter, and I love this book. It was just that one scene at the very beginning that made me upset with it. And I reread that around like the 17th. It might have been the 21st. Then the very last books that I read this month were the Scholomance series, Book 1, Deadly Education by Naomi Novik, Book 2, The Last Graduate by Naomi Novik, and Book 3, The Golden Enclave by Naomi Novik. I read these books in like 30 hours. It was like 9 hours for the first book, 10 hours for the second book, 11 hours for the last book. It was fantastic. It was fantastic. The only thing that I don't think I liked about the Golden Enclave, because the first two books were super solid, and then the third book just felt like it wasn't as solid. Um, and I don't know why that is. Like, I can't pinpoint why I thought that. But I did. Um, and I think part of the ending was like I didn't like the like 6 months later kind of thing that happened on the very last chapter. Um, I will say that like maybe the reason I think that it's not as solid is because I remember distinctly several times while I was reading it, I was like, I know they're setting something up, but I don't know what it's going to be, and it would like come through later and I'd be like, oh yeah, I guess that makes sense. But it just like wasn't great in my opinion. Um the other two books were so good and so solid, and I loved it. I loved the world building. I loved the characters. I loved that idea of like two people being like the very opposites of each other. I loved how strong the morality in the book was. I thought it was fantastic. I loved the idea that this character was supposed to be like a dark witch, and she was supposed to be like the evil witch, and then she did everything in her power not to be that because she had such a strong moral compass, and it was so well done. Um highly recommend you pick up the Scholomance series by Naomi Novik. It's so good. So good. Um I don't know what I'm gonna read next. I honestly am like, I don't know. I know I have The Nine Eyes of Lucian. I don't know who that's by. I know it's a critical role book. I have that on my shelf to read. And then I have my like yearly reads, which are I read these books yearly. So one of them is The Ocean at the End of the Lane by Neil Gaiman. The other is The Secret Garden by Frances Hodgkins. That's wrong. Um, oh, I'm so bad at with names. And then the third book is I'm not seeing it on my shelf, so I'm like, which book do I usually read yearly? Oh, Howl's Moving Castle. Um, those three are up next, and I also have a bunch of books still to read on my Audible, including Queen of the Tearling. Uh, what's the other books I have yet to read? I have like 6 books yet to read on my Audible. One of them is Fairy Tales by Stephen King. I'm super looking forward to that. Um, I can't remember the other ones. All right, well, that is my book update for the end of March. Thank you for joining me today. I've had a lovely time, and I'll see you guys next time. I've been here at the Bud, and bye bye.